22, 23 million people.
If I never sing another song. Dorothy Squires, welcome to Bristol and to Radio Bristol. Is that your philosophy at the moment, Dorothy?
It's almost a defeatist attitude, isn't it?
It is a defeatist attitude, yes.
You wouldn't call yourself a defeatist, though?
No way. No way would I call myself a defeatist. And don't call me a fighter, for that I'm not. Fighting to survive, that's a different thing. You know what I mean? That's what I've had to do, but with all the cataclysms, I've survived mentally, only just, you know. I have never done this in my life before, but I must tell you. See, this is the sleeve of the book, and this is the jacket of the book, and it should have been out on May the 6th, but 007's holding the whole works up. But this is out on Decca, and you look at the, hey, look, hang on, look at, this is where he loves me, actually. So, there's only been ever two men in my life. That doesn't mean to say I'm a lousy lover. I'm an unfortunate. I always envy, in a way, a person that can jump in the sack with anybody. But I'm not like that. I've got to love them very much before I do that. But Billy Reed, I lived with for 8 years. He was a great deal older than I was. He was a brilliant musician, a brilliant writer, one of the most prolific writers this generation has ever seen, or this century will ever see. Now that he wrote the words and the music. I mean, he had 5 in this order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in the hit parade at once. I mean, he had 3 in the American hit parade for 3 years running. 1, 2, 3. And he was fantastic. But, you see, we employed 40 people. And then one day I just couldn't take any more. Jealousy was ridiculous. I couldn't, he'd have me followed. He had no reason to, but he'd have me followed. And in the end, I just couldn't take it any longer. And I'd invested, and it was a lot of money for me then, 10,000 in a Fiat Antonetti. And one morning, after the pantomime was over, I just got in my car, and I write about this in the book. And I drove away. I couldn't take any more. I'd lost 2 stone of weight with this insane jealousy. But I'd like to say that...
How long were you with him?
I was 8 years with him. But I think it was his genius. Well, I mean, genius is the razor edge of insanity, isn't it, really? So it was his genius that almost made him paranoid. You know what I mean? And a turbulent life. I had a wonderful 10-year marriage with Roger. It was a super marriage. He was a friend of a Tonetti girl that had lived in my lodge, Betty Newman. And it was incredible, actually. She came into me, and I had given a party for Norman Newell, who was my recording manager. And there was Pep Clark and Charles Coburn, the American actor, and, you know, there was a lot there. And she said, "Do you mind if I invited him?" I said, "No, not at all." So that was kismet fate, if you like. And he came later in the party, and then I don't know what arrangements he'd made with him, how he was going to get there. I didn't even know he was coming, you know, I wasn't concerned. And the telephone, I was passing the library, you know, and the telephone, and I picked up the telephone, and he said, "I'm at the station. Betty said you'd send a car down." So he said, I said, "Who are you?" "Roger Moore." "Well," I said, "What do you look like?" So he said, "I'm short, fat, and bald." So I went back and I said, "Somebody go down the station and get a short, fat, bald guy, you know." So anyway, about 10 or 15 minutes later, I was milling around, you know, and Betty said, "This is Roger Moore." I said, "How do you do? Would you have a drink?" So he said, "I have an ulcer." So, I said, "I am sorry." Oh, he said, "Don't be sorry. It's quite fashionable." I thought, "Oh, what a bore." It's quite fashionable. No, I thought, who writes these scripts, you know? However, that's when I met him. And that association was to last for 10 years.
It was a love match, was it, between you?
Very much so. Very much so.
But their marriage broke down. Roger Moore, seen here working on The Spy Who Loved Me, fell for the Italian actress Luisa Mattioli, and that was that. But not for Dorothy. She refused to divorce him until 1968, by which time Roger's children by Luisa were aged 5 and 2. The differences between the parties received the full play of publicity. From first to last, it was a very public separation, and still is.
communication with Roger ever. Now, I should have been there at the hotel with the kettle of bed, because the tea, you couldn't get tea, you couldn't get, and there was nobody there. So really, it was my fault. But on the other hand, you could say, if I'd have done this, if I'd have done, but for that. But the ifs and buts of our lives aren't ours to define. You know, that old guy upstairs gets them all in perspective in good time. Do you know what I mean?
But why all the bitterness afterwards? When it was obvious that he'd gone and he didn't want to come back. All
No,
bitterness.
hang on. You're quite wrong there. When you say, you read, you are now quoting something you have read.
That's right.
When you read my book, you will read the truth. Roger went and came back about 7 times before he finally, and it was I eventually had to do something about it. But the bitterness came. Now, nobody can help falling in love. This is an emotion none of us have control over. But there always has to be, I think, integrity, tying up the loose ends, seeing that everything is done with the least amount of hurt. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And any divorce, doesn't matter what the circumstances are, there's always a tremendous hurt. It doesn't, you know, it never, it can never be avoided. But you see, if it was a disintegration of a marriage quickly, you know, or if it was disintegrated, I'm sorry, months before that. But it really wasn't, because I was getting letters 2 a day, you know, and phone calls, and he was behind the Iron Curtain, and to get a phone call through it was virtually almost impossible. You know?
You were very hurt then.
Well, wouldn't you be?
Oh, yes,
My God, wouldn't you be? I mean, we just spent about, I suppose, $35,000 on our penthouse, and we'd only lived in it 4 weeks, you know, so we'd only come over to England for about 2 months. So hurt, it wasn't so much that. My legs were cut from under me. My arms were chopped off. In other words, I was dazed. I didn't know what it was all about. And I didn't know where he was for months and months and months and months. I didn't know anything about it. Now, this is what I mean. Bitterness comes. I'm not bitter to Roger. I'm very bitter to the Italian lady.
Dorothy works on a musical based on her book. In the late 60s, everything went wrong. Her house burned down, there were court cases, and finally a trial at the Old Bailey for corruption, at which she was acquitted.
But I had 4 years of living hell, I would say. I was getting pornographic letters, and my front door was one night, what looked like blood. It was all jam and tomato ketchup and everything, and on the floor was a picture of crude drawings of men's penises, and saying the ones that was for me. Oh, it was absolutely ghastly. I had anxiety neurosis. I was on the point of having electrical shock therapy, and I wondered if I ever would have been cured out of it. I don't have an enemy or anybody that I hate enough to wish that on. Not even the graves would I wish that on.
The calming influence which entered her life at this time was, of all things, racehorse ownership. She rushed into a risky business where normally angels fear to tread and made a terrific success of it. Horses like Esban and Norwegian Flag have been profitable too.
Those horses brought the respect of the public back. I've got 5 in training. They're my very nice. And I've been very successful as an owner, thank God.
Except I think we'll run him a bit differently this year, you know. He'll make a fabulous chaser, won't he? Yeah. I told Earl Jones, you know, Paddy. I said, Paddy, Earl, he refused to jump at something. He said, well, of course, he said, so would I refuse to jump at something. I don't blame him either. Anyway, may I say, looks rather good, doesn't she?
Yeah.
I'm not so happy with Frank Gazette, but in a month's time he'll be fabulous. That chestnut is some horse. Just look at that eye.
Those horses brought back the respect. certainly Esbjerg, and Norwegian flag. I mean, he won the Lady Schleswig Gold Cup, the Scottish Grand National. Between them, you know, I was in the top owners. I was one below the Queen Mother, you know. And the one thing that I've come out of show business, I've become one heck of a philosopher. I mean, all the cataclysms that I've had, you wonder at the time, you know, why is it happening to me? But out of it, I'm not a profound religious person, but I do believe this one overall director that directs us all. And he gets his scenes all into perspective. In his wisdom, it takes time. And you question it. You know, when my marriage finished, and it finished so abruptly, then you question it at the time. Why did it happen to me? And of course, the answer was my answer when I walked out on the London Palladium stage in 1970, December the 6th. And that was the answer. Because that I will never, ever, ever relive ever again. Because the warmth, the love, the thousands of flowers that bedecked the flower stage, the standing ovation. Yeah, I'd been crying for one love when I had thousands. Now I'm just a clown who fought for fame. I had no sense to come in out of the rain. Those slings and arrows, they all find their aim to the heart of this clown who entertains.